We hear a lot in coverage of China that this or that thing China's leaders have just done is because they want to stay in power. It's become a sort of habit in thinking about China that seems to explain everything they do, but actually it doesn't really tell us very much at all. Isa Ding is a political scientist at Northwestern University in the United States, and she calls this idea authoritarian teleology. In other words, it's a way of trying to explain the behaviour of authoritarian regimes based on their function or their purpose, rather than why they do things. In fact, this is very useful for trying to explain something you don't really understand. You don't have to bother working out why they do things because you already have the answer. Why did they do this? They're doing it to stay in power. How do we know that? Because that's just what they do. Ding points out that this term regime survival gets used all the time to explain why authoritarian regimes do the things they do. She says this: everything the government does might be described as a strategy, which is a part of some grand strategy. And this Machiavellian image of the Chinese state is simply inaccurate. I've observed the Chinese government closely in my research, and believe it or not, a lot of times they don't know what they're doing. Sometimes they make good decisions, other times they make bad decisions, and they usually don't think ahead 3 steps down the game tree. So does the CCP want to stay in power? Of course. But is it preoccupied with staying in power on a day-to-day basis? My answer is no. I think Ding is making a really important point here. China's leaders and the party more generally are dealing with a lot of complex problems, and they're not always in control of everything. And also they can't do whatever they want, but they're often portrayed as if they can, and this misses out the fact that they're often dealing with all kinds of economic and social dilemmas. And of course, the party and government officials in China, just like anywhere else, have to operate within power structures that restrict what they can and can't do. But if we simply assume that they do things because they want to stay in power, then we don't have to look any deeper under the surface to examine what these dilemmas and restraints might be. There's a deeper assumption underpinning this whole idea as well, and that is that everyone, everywhere, really wants to live in a liberal democracy. This is an assumption that you find a lot in American political science, and it also gets reproduced in media reports by journalists talking about authoritarian regimes, especially China. It's not always stated explicitly, but it's often there if you look for it. And the logic goes like this: everyone wants to live in a liberal democracy because everybody wants to be able to vote. Because China is not a liberal democracy and their people didn't vote for them, that means that their own people don't really want them in charge. So they have to always keep doing things to prop up their own power, or the regime won't survive. And that fundamentally is how we explain everything that China does. Here's just one example of exactly this. It's from a couple of years ago, and it really jumped out at me at the time. This is Edward White, the Financial Times China correspondent, speaking on the podcast FT News Briefing back in October 2022. He's talking about Chinese policymakers' efforts to raise levels of consumption in China. In other words, to get ordinary householders spending more. This has been a goal of Chinese policymakers for a very long time, and we know this because they've been saying so repeatedly in public statements. The host of the podcasts has asked White why he thinks China's leaders aren't doing more to raise household consumption. And here's his response: that is the sort of thing that China should be able to do. They're in a position to do it. They've got the fiscal headroom to do it. So we just don't really understand why they're not doing it, except for the fact that the calculation may well have been made that to really unleash the Chinese middle class, that means removing the controls that the Communist Party has in place. You know, around freedom of movement and freedom of speech. And that as the middle class grows and becomes more aspirational, I think Beijing is scared that those aspirations start to move from just purchasing different products to thinking about maybe we want a different political system or different leadership. And that's at the heart of what Beijing's concerned about. I find this quote really quite amazing, actually. There's a series of jumps in logic here, from encouraging people to spend more, to issues of free speech, to wanting a different kind of political system. But these jumps in logic don't really seem to be based on any actual evidence from China. It seems that White has a very deep set of assumptions underlying his thinking, which goes like this. Chinese people naturally must want a different kind of political system from the one they have now. Therefore, China's leaders must be constantly afraid of this, and therefore they are not doing more to raise consumption because they want to protect their own power. It just seems to be a kind of circular reasoning which has come to fill in the gap because, as White says himself, he can't figure out any other reason for it. But did he really look hard enough for other reasons, or did he stop looking because he thought he already had the answer? Now let's look at a very different response to the same question. This is from the economist Michael Pettis, and in my view, his answer is a lot more sophisticated and he doesn't fall into the authoritarian teleology trap. So here is Pettis on the question of why China's leaders haven't done more to raise household consumption. I think it really helps to think about it systemically, something that economists don't do enough. And that is, when you look at the total income produced by any economy, China or the US or anybody else, that income is divided into different groups. One of the ways you can divide the economy is ordinary people who consume most of their income, rich people who consume very little of their income, businesses who consume none of their income, and governments which, if it's a country like China, almost none of it is consumed. So if you want consumption to go up, you have to transfer it to ordinary households. You have to transfer income. You have to give them a bigger share. That sounds great. Everyone's happy to get more, but by definition, a bigger share for me means a smaller share for you. And as you go through all the various forms of transfers, the only real way to solve the problem in China is transfers from local governments. Now that's easy to say, but you think the last 30 or 40 years, local governments have benefited from transfers in the opposite direction, right? For some background on this, I have another video on China's growth model, which you might want to watch after this one if you're interested. So a lot of Chinese growth has been built around huge spending by local governments, subsidized by transfers into the local governments. And so the political, the business, the financial elites in each region or each province are really built around those transfers in. And now what we're saying is, what we must do is reverse the transfers. Instead of being on the receiving end of transfers, local governments must now be on the delivering end of much larger transfers. And I would argue that that involves a really substantial change in the political, business, and financial institutions. It involves a change in the distribution of power. So it's easy to talk about as if it were just an economic issue, but ultimately it's not an economic issue. It's primarily a political issue. In other words, according to Pettis, China's central leaders are facing a power struggle between the centre and the localities. These deeper structural issues are missing entirely from Edward White's explanation, because he fell into what Isa Ding might call the authoritarian teleology trap. Thank you for watching.